So thank you very much for having me here after this beautiful performance. It's an honor to speak. I will speak about the perspective why we have organized or why we're trying to organize this meeting. A meeting of seekers of free and democratic life. The People's Platform Europe, under the slogan Reclaim the Initiative, was born out of from the need to share the experiences of those who struggled against the forces of oppression and to discuss the possibilities and opportunities in the search for a free life. Today, we have to come together not only to analyze capitalist modernity or assess the current situation, but also a community dedicated to understanding, addressing, and collectively finding solutions to the most urgent issues of our time. The world is on the brink of historic change. The geopolitical changes, technological advances, ecological destruction, and the economic social crisis we face are at an unprecedented level in both their complexity and impact. But with every great challenge comes to the potential for a great opportunity. Our capacity to learn, innovate, build solidarity, and create alternative solutions is key to realizing the opportunities. Why do we need such a platform? Today's crisis of economic instability, ecological collapse, social alienation, and political dysfunction demand urgent solutions. But these challenges can only be fully understood through a profound analysis of the systematic dynamics of capitalist modernity and the historical trajectory of Eurocentric capitalism. Beginning in the 16th century, colonial powers imposed violent system of resources extraction, land confiscation, and labor exploitation. These actions dismantled local economies and communities and laid the foundations of Eurocentric hegemonic global economic order, a system that strives on domination and perpetuates dependency. Historically, capitalist modernity has operated in a spiral of permanent crisis. This crisis erodes economic, political, and social structures, while the system sustains itself by masking its vulnerabilities and devising new mechanisms of control. The Cold War era illustrates these dynamics as a major turning point. The geopolitical, economic, and technological changes that followed the Cold War consolidated the hegemony of the capitalist system. This period was marked by increasing repression of popular and revolutionary movements around the world. The end of the Cold War and the geopolitical, geoeconomic interactions caused by the new technological and industrial developments or revolution led to the imposition of unipolar system, or so-called New World Order under the hegemony of the USA. This aimed to eliminate popular and revolutionary struggles, especially those of workers, women, students, and youth, indigenous peoples, and national liberation movements, and ecological environmental struggles. While some of these were drawn into liberalism and thus neutralized. Others were criminalized under the pretext of counterterrorism. It was under this condition that we entered 21st century. Although the unipolar international system under the US domination managed to control Western and Eastern Europe for a long time, to manage the Asian economic crisis in the late 90s and partially manage the global financial crisis 2007 and 2008. It also accelerated a serious and antagonistic struggle of hegemony with the global capitalist system. Despite their own internal contradictions, the forces of capitalist modernity have cooperated against the oppressed again. As the so-called New World War project was built on trade wars, cultural domination, interdependency, international migration, and internal hegemonic competition for greater share of capital accumulation, the contradictions between the segments of the periphery of the unipolar world system and those seeking for sovereignty deepened. In contrast to the nationalists who seek to maintain themselves through nation-state capitalism, the globalists who seek to maintain their dominance through global production chains, digital networks, and transnational organizations and companies are using their technological advantages to control society with biopower methods, using the biotechnical and communication technical possibilities at their disposal. They practice the logic of only the strong have the chance and the right to live, a kind of political Darwinism. While the globalists who seek more exploitation and profit through the abolition of national borders want to hold the world together horizontally, they want to classify the humanity vertically. The aim of this effort is to create a global scale of society that is culturally uprooted and thus hegemonious, politically helpless, morally collapsed, alienated from the nature and trapped in the virtual patterns of life. In order to overcome this crisis that has been deepening for decades, the globalist forces are now trying to transform capitalist modernity, including its three pillars: capitalism, the nation-state, and industrialism, organizationally and paradigmatically. These capitalist forces are not trying to overcome this crisis. They are trying to make profit by managing this crisis, by deepening this crisis. Contradictions and rivalries between the US, the EU, and classic nation states. For years, leading EU representatives have been talking about the strategic autonomy of Europe and have predicted that the EU will defend its interests globally through the language of economic power. EU member states, primarily Germany and France, are trying to gain an advantageous position in the emerging multipolar world order through an alliance that is politically, economically, and militarily united. As such, they have sought to increase EU membership by adding new members from the Balkans and Caucasus. Since the early 2000s, many EU countries, led by Germany and France, have pursued a policy of establishing economic relations with the other two major powers in Eurasia, Russia and China. But with the Ukraine war, the EU was forced to admit that it still lacked the necessary autonomy and power to pursue a self-sufficient policy that did not rely on forming alliances with one of the parties to the conflict, the United States or Russia and China. The international institutions that dominated the system established especially after the Second World War, the UN, the EU, NATO, Council of Europe, Arab League, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and many other economic and security institutions are now being used by the system powers against each other, let alone no longer maintaining the system itself. These platforms have turned into platforms for the balance of power between the great powers. These institutions, which have become areas where concepts such as human rights, peace, human values, women's rights, reconciliation, etc., are emptied on their meaning and used against each other, are now in a phase where law and norms no longer work for anybody. Not only are these institutions dysfunctional, but they are also essential manifestations of deadlock system. It has caused major crises like energy supply issues, rising inflation, food supply crisis, large-scale involuntary migration and security. Thus, the hegemonic power of the system have essentially become an ideological, military intelligence minority that dominates the majority, which rejects their social and ideological logic of political methods. The system is in a constant state of war against the society itself. The crisis of global capitalism, the failure of positivist science and knowledge production, and contradictions of the nation state are deepening social discontent. The project of creating a consumer society is increasingly leading to spiritual and moral emptiness and decay. This should be read as a loss of truth in modernity itself. In terms of technology, the development of mass communication channels and social media networks are key points to be confronted in the coming times. They allow or more subtle shaping of thought, great individualization of people, and the spread of misogyny and right-wing ideology. The system, which has reached an ideological and truth impasse, is now planning to control people by means of misuse of artificial intelligence. The system, which constantly creates war and crisis by printing money without any backing in order to protect and sustain the state capitalism on the pockets and backs of the people, has, in a way, structuralized the crisis with its own hand. In this context, the US, together with its imperialist allies and agents in the group of G7, is constantly waging various forms of war, aggression against rival powers and the people of the world. In order to make more profit and eliminate internal crises, the capitalist system relies on the strategy of occupying, destroy, rebuild, depopulate, repopulate. We see this most openly in the ongoing wars in Palestine, in Ukraine, in Lebanon, in Kurdistan, in Syria. The destruction, depopulation, and reconstruction, reorganization of areas is the aim of these wars. Capitalism tries to achieve results by discrediting and differentiating the values of democratic communal society, especially in the face of women liberation struggles, which force the system to change radically. It tries to multiply the ways and methods of maintaining itself by developing policies with 1,001 masks. On the one hand, it continues its policies of instrumentalizing women within the rising fascism with the face of women, which has developed in Europe in recent years. And on the other hand, it continues its policies of taking away the power of women by returning them to their traditional place in the society. On the one hand, it implements the policy of victimizing women to the strictest policies of the patriarchal system by cooperating with the forces that consider women as the property of man and deprive them of all their rights. However, women's liberation struggle are the guarantee for achieving a democratic and free society. In addition to destroying societies, the capitalist system is ruthlessly plundering nature for more resources and profit through the use and development of technology. The ecological crisis we are experiencing today are reached a level where life cannot be sustained. Widespread forest fires, forest fires, hurricanes, floods, droughts, melting glaciers, the sinking of islands in the oceans, the effects of extreme heat and drought, up of lakes, limited food resources, shrinking energy resources, and the politics of ecocide pose great danger to the future of our planet. Factors such as inflation, high cost of living, trade and sovereignty wars, social unrest, geopolitical conflicts, and the increased possibility of nuclear war make the future more unknown and dangerous. In addition, excessive and unsustainable levels of debt, the decline in social investment, and the rapid and unlimited development of military technologies are returning to societies as oppression and exploitation. The problems show that the systematic crisis is now structural. It is not accepted by society and is in the process of collapsing. Therefore, protecting not only people but also the nature is the basic condition for defending life and represent a revolutionary effort. Areas of social resistance. The ongoing war is essentially ideological and hegemonic in nature. Its purpose is to change the political system established in the 20th century and adapt in the conditions of the 21st century. Such economic, political, diplomatic, and military struggle processes in which old structures and balances are destroyed and new structures and balances are sought to be established are important transitional processes in which strategic transformations are experienced nowadays. These are phases in which both the people and revolutionary forces and the hegemonic powers can make significant gains if they act in a prepared and organized manner. As the most important theoretician and leader of the Kurdish freedom movement, Abdullah Öcalan, said, quote, "Undoubtedly, hegemonic powers do not always win in big wars. People can also gain a lot. In fact, hegemonic powers can systematically lose. People can systematically gain," end of quote. Especially in the last 10 years, it has become clear that people all over the world, not only in the peripheries, but also in the center of capitalist modernity, are increasingly protesting, objecting, and revolting. People's contradictions with the system of capitalist modernity are deepening on an individual and collective level. The struggles that have been waging around the world have resonated in Europe. In the US, the Black Lives Matter movement emerged against the structural state violence and executions against black people caused by the white supremacy. Actually, the last words of George Floyd, "I can't breathe," truly express the emotional state of societies around the world. The Ni Una Menos movement, which began in Argentina 2015 against femicide, spread beyond the Abiyala continent, leading to transnational and organized struggles in countries such as Italy and Portugal. Around the world, movements against harassment and rape culture have grown. In 2019, the Las Tesis protest, which began in Chile and spread around the world, said that the patriarchal system and the state were at the root of harassment and rape. In 2022, with the murder of Gina Amini, the Jin Jian Azadi protest, which spread around the world and were taken up not only by women, but also by men, showed the rebellion of women and society against the patriarchal capitalist system and the power of the demand for freedom. At the end of 2018, the Yellow Vest movement was born in France in response to rising cost of living. The biggest strike for 30 years took place in Germany. There were widespread workers' actions in England. The resistance of Belgian peasants is an important part of the social movements. The environmental movements in many countries made the crisis of the system more visible. In addition, societies in many parts of the world have developed forms of resistance that challenge anti-democratic regimes and oppressive state power. Collapsing liberalism and Western democracy. With the spread of the Third World War, the hegemonic powers are now struggling to renew themselves. In Europe, the political plane is moving towards fascism and extreme right with the rise of centrist, nationalist, and racist parties. Hostility towards women, youth, nature, labor, and immigrants is not only the policy of the extreme right, but also of the centrist parties. Far-right parties are not cause of this situation, but the result. The state point to racist and extreme nationalist circles, calling past a method to make people accept the cholera. Here, the aim is to destroy the power and determination of societies to fight against the system through the politics of security and fear. It is not enough to explain the crisis of capitalist modernity only in economic terms. The notion created by liberalism that have the freedom to choose and to do what you want is now collapsing. Every moment, people are being told what to choose and what to do as a result of digital data collected about them. Decisions are no longer made by so-called free people, but by transnational systems and corporations that direct them in their own interest. The latest technological developments are used with the logic of maximum profit, rapidly moving towards the classification of humanity is irrelevant and useless. Once again, social engineering is in full swing to create a single type of human being. Public confidence in Western democracy is declining. Lower voter turnout reflects this loss of faith in elections and political leaders. Police violence against protesters, a basic democratic right, further undermines confidence. Throughout the EU, states are prioritizing militarization over the social welfare. The billions spent on arms in the Ukraine-Russia war are only a small example for this. So what to do? Given the damage that the crisis of the system have caused to society, there is a widespread expectation of even greater economic and social crisis in the coming years. Demands for change are growing, but how should this change take place? The majority of the European left is still weak when it comes to reinterpreting the world and Europe. They unfortunately lack the ability to understand and analyze the global context and connections to produce the political programs and strategic struggle that the times demand from us. Also, most solutions they propose are expressed mainly in postmodern discourse. They are legitimate demands such as defending identities and freedoms against ethnic, religious, and sexual oppression, actively opposing ecological destruction, supporting immigrants, and opening up space for local politics. However, this is a danger of moving from an alternative to capitalism to an alternative within capitalism. This is one of the main reasons for the rise of the right. The classical European left urgently needs to be more clearly opposed to the reformist understanding and policies. It needs to have more concrete, practical policies that are intertwined with society. Beyond identifying and defining crises, It needs to overcome serious blockage and repetition in terms of developing solutions and alternatives. For example, prioritizing the struggle within the parliamentary system as a communication of revived form of left populism cannot bring the change it promised. In fact, it delays the ground for radical change. On the other hand, the forces outside the system, although they have important proposals and projects, are not sufficiently organized and have yet to create expected changes or necessary organizations. New challenges and opportunities. In the face of environmental crisis, the ecological movement will radicalize and become more locally organized. Although the mass movement has diminished since 2019, the struggle is focused on concrete projects and territorial defense. Young people are particularly involved. By fighting for climate justice, they are also developing a just perspective for the future of planet of our Earth. The feminist struggle has the potential to pioneer mass movements and organization through participation and leadership. If it succeeds in insisting that the liberation of the most oppressed is the measure of the struggle for freedom, it can play an immensely profound role in the reorganization of life in all sections of society and throughout the world. The democratic communality process is only an updated version of mother-woman sociality. Social truth can only be reached through this method. Unless the patriarchy imposed on society is overcome, social truth will not be revealed in all its dimensions in terms of philosophy, science, ethics, aesthetic, and religion. Only in this way can the right path to be found regarding ecological destructions and social inequality and individual freedom. The defense of basic needs and the constant struggle against new measures taken by the government and the fight to maintain decent living conditions must gain strength in the form of local and specific but coordinated struggles. There is a new understanding of different forms of proletariat and oppressed peoples. And if this is including in the class analysis, more realistic and faster solution can be found. Organized forms of the struggles for democracy and freedom against the system are now urgently needed. At the same time, they need to build diverse links with each other in a democratic and confederal way. An effective response to multiple crises and chaos can only be given through multiple democratic alliances. This must strike an optimal balance between the local and the global, the particular and the universal, the original and the common. While our age provides the necessary technical means for communication, organization, coordination, exchange, and communality on a global scale, the main ground on which the struggle will be waged must be local. The effectiveness of the platform depends on the grassroots organization and a concrete effort to tackle problems at their roots. Achieving our goal requires a framework that emphasizes actions and ongoing dialogue within progressive forces at the regional level. By fostering cooperation between localized struggles, we can build a collective force that not only tackles the specific challenges, but also works to build a broader anti-capitalist movement. The holistic approach allows us to link individual efforts to a larger narrative, creating a united front against systematic injustice. Through this synergy, we can amplify our impact and drive transformative change. This is a huge and historic responsibility that falls on everyone's shoulders. As those struggling in the context of Europe, we also have a duty to dismantle the unfreedom, injustice, and destruction caused by European power around the world. We are convinced that a process of collective discussions on the broadest possible platform of democratic and revolutionary organization, movements, and collective is necessary to find the right answers to the question of our time. With the People's Platform Europe, we want to offer a transitional European framework in which we can have this exchange and find solutions to the existing problems. Yes, we are the majority, and we have the motivation to reclaim the initiative. Thank you very much.